All right, so welcome to our session, Help, I Need to Get My Project Back on Track. I'm Louise, and
I'm Rollin.
And we seem to get the projects that need to get back on track, so that's probably why we have elected to help out here. None of you have ever had a project not go well, right? All right. What's an example of something that went wrong?
People not necessarily getting things done, but we can get done, or people not volunteering to help out so that we can get things done.
Okay. So people not volunteering, people not accomplishing their tasks on time.
Overloaded.
People are overloaded. Good.
Requirements, Cliche.
No, that never happens. No. Anything else? Come on.
Understaffed.
Understaffed, that's a good one. How about the wrong project? Somebody thought it was a good idea at the time? Yeah, that happens. What else?
Not enough time.
Not enough time. Yeah. So competing priorities. Joy.
Not enough budget.
Not enough budget. Good point. Anything else? No, we have a few. Too many projects, so overloaded staff. How many of you have tried to put in MasterControl and SAP? Yeah, I see somebody nodding back there. That was fun, wasn't it? Misunderstandings, that never happens. Where could misunderstandings occur that would throw your project off?
Undefined scope or confusing scope.
Confusing scope, yes.
There's a handoff.
Handoffs, yes. But the stakeholder thinks this project is going to do this, and then the project manager thinks it's going to do this, and the team leader thinks it's going to do a third thing. That never happens either, right? Yeah. Business needs changed. You're implementing SAP, and you get a new CEO who wants PeopleSoft. That never happens either, right? Single person implementation teams, we kind of covered that with people being overloaded. Loss of interest, that's a really big one. It's like that kind of goes hand in hand with a small implementation team, but it can also have other factors, right? You just get going down the road and you get sidetracked and it takes too long, and then all of a sudden you're wondering, well, we've gotten along this far without it, maybe we don't need it after all. That's never a good thing for a stakeholder to decide, right? Skipping steps in the project, that's my favorite from a project management perspective, is we have these things that need to be accomplished in our project. Sequencing kind of is important, so somebody decides that they don't really want to do this piece because it's going to be kind of boring, I'm going to go do this piece instead. Has that happened to any of you? Yeah, what happens when that happens?
The project or pieces fail or delay. Because you have to go back and
That's right, you have to go back and do it again. So not only do you have to do what you skipped over, but you have to redo what was done out of sequence. Yeah, that's my favorite, I think. Rollin, what's your favorite?
Of why projects fail?
Yes.
I think it's a combination of the loss of interest, taking too long, and just internal changes within the organization. Scope changes, scope creep.
So we're going to try to address some of these things as to how to get some of these back on track. And we have ideas, but you have ideas too. You have experience. So it would be really fun for you to contribute. You've done a great job so far. Thank you. Want to go to next slide? So getting these projects back on track. So you have to redefine the objectives. So figure out what the present state is. That's the first thing. What does the project look like today? Not where you would like it to be, not where your manager might think it is, not where it'll be if you have another week. Where is it today? Today. That is so important. Where is it today? And then you can figure out, how did it get here? Because as we saw, you have a whole list of things that can go wrong. We had some things that can go wrong. You really need to be digging, though, to find. And I'll give you an example of one project that I had not too long ago. It appeared on the surface that people were too busy and they weren't really doing the work that they needed to be doing. And that just didn't seem right from the people that I was working with on the team. The customer team implementation was, they were just really enthusiastic and they really, really wanted to work, but they just weren't going anywhere. So it's like, okay, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So by digging and digging, I finally got to the level where they were all working on different environments. So any of the results that they got and would get together to compare was so discouraging because nothing really matched. But it took a really long time to get to that level. So on the surface, it looked like people weren't really cooperating, weren't really doing their job, when fundamentally there was a much larger issue there. And until you can find what really went wrong, it could look like it's a much easier fix than it really is. So that's really important, is the root cause. And then once you get to that, then you know what went wrong. You know exactly where your project is at the moment. The next thing you need to do is figure out, where am I going to go with this? So this is the perfect time. You reevaluate it. What do I still include? Are there things that are no longer important? Is the sequencing correct? Do I have the right people on the team? What is the most critical piece? And determining if the team has the right members in it. That's really important too, because when you look at it again and reanalyze it, part of it could be that you had all the technical expertise that you needed, but you really didn't have the person to drive it. So you need a driver. Or you had a really good driver, but you weren't going in the right direction. Any number of those things can go wrong. So you really have to be brutally honest about reevaluating what it is that you have and where do you want to take this. Do you want to do the next slide? Or do you want me to keep going?
Okay, and then I'll get to
Okay.
do the rest.
So one of the important things that I'm going to skip down, I'm going to do what I said nobody should do. Right? I'm going to skip down to this one, the decision pyramid. Because another reason that projects could fail is you're looking at it the wrong way. Every organization has a priority. Some organizations' priority is the stakeholder interest. Other organizations is customer satisfaction. Other organizations is employee satisfaction. So you could have the perfect project with the perfect motivation, the perfect driver for the wrong organization. Because if their driver is customer satisfaction and you're leading this project to make money for the shareholders, what will happen? You will fail. It's a great project, you have a great plan, a great team, it's going down the right way, it's filling the wrong needs. And that's overlooked most of the time. What is the company's driver for this project? Okay? And how you bring it back on track really depends on that particular viewpoint, basically. And then all get back on the same viewpoint, and it'll make a really big difference. So I'm going to go back up at the top here to explore every aspect of the project. Kind of touched on that a little bit. You might have the wrong team members, or you might have, the right technical people, the wrong driver. You might have the wrong sponsor. You might be trying to do, and this happens quite often, you might be trying to solve a business need, drive a business solution, and your sponsor is IT. Anybody see anything wrong with that? Or the other way around. You could be trying to do something for IT, and the person who keeps chiming in is the CFO. Right? I'm getting some nods, so that happens to you guys as well. So you need to look at, and Rollin is going to cover the people that we need to address in the stakeholders, the communication, and all of that. So I'm going to skip that because that'll be his. So back to the common viewpoint, not just defining what drives the organization, which drives the project, again, customer satisfaction, shareholders, or the company objectives, but also individual desires and expectations. What is the hardest thing to manage in a project? It's not the people, it's not the technology, it's the expectations that people have of this project. Again, you can be live with something on time, on budget, everything is rosy, but it's not exactly what the CEO was looking for. You've got a project fail. So expectations is really, really, really critical. And technical limitations and functionality. Sometimes the best thing to do with a project is what?
Build it.
That's right. Because the technical aspect of it just isn't fitting. The functionality that looked great once you really start using it and thinking it through just doesn't fit the business need. So yeah, sometimes you just need to kill it. Mr. Rollin, it's your turn.
Okay, we're all tired of Louise. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So part of one of the things that I really like about project management is working with the different groups, with the different stakeholders. And how difficult is that for you guys to involve the multiple stakeholders in your organization? Is it easy? Is it hard? Why is it not easy?
Because usually they're upper level management, so getting their time, getting their buy-in, support, because you need them for money, resources.
Okay. Anybody else? Those are actually valid.
It's kind of interesting where the projects that we work on, each group, you have to have a subject matter expert assigned to the project. The CEO and CFO has put down, I don't want to say mandate, but everybody's got to buy into the project.
They put a mandate down.
Put a mandate down, and so there's expectations of, okay, I've got to attend the meeting, and then once they start coming, they go, oh, this is not a lot of work at all. I just need to provide expertise in this area, and it's more and more groups kind of understand, oh, this helps us get to our goals. I like it the way it is, but I like it because it's not good. Some can be quite difficult because they don't want to respond. They feel it's not important, it doesn't affect them.
So how do we manage those shareholders that are difficult? How do we manage that? Is that something? I mean, I take it everybody that's in here has managed a project or 100 at some point. How do you manage those shareholders so that you can maximize your efforts as a project manager or the project leader? How do you maximize that?
Seems like, as long as you're keeping information, keeping them informed,
Yes.
that's probably the most critical. You're keeping them informed on a timely manner.
Okay, so communication.
Communications.
So, and that's one of the big things that I like about project management is communication, because it puts you in touch with different levels from upper management executives all the way down to the programmers or the line personnel that are actually, if you're in a manufacturing facility, it puts you in contact with the whole scope of the entire organization. So they're all shareholders, and sometimes on some of the successful teams that I've managed, the shareholders are not just upper management. The shareholders are the line staff. The guys that are actually doing the work themselves can give some of the most valuable input and corrections and corrective actions that we can look at. So, to me, as we analyze a project that's going bad or has gone bad, then that's one of the things that we always ask ourselves: Do we have the right shareholders? Do we have the right support? Do we have communication gaps? Communication gaps is probably the biggest key point of failure in any project. Is even if it's to say we don't need to do this project, if you don't communicate that, you're going to continue on down the road. So,
Risk.
okay, so everybody's seen one of these, right? We use it in MasterControl in our kappa feeders, a risk system. Risk management in project management is a key point to identify as you go throughout this process of analyzing your project in its current state and saying what risks do we have and how do we mitigate those risks. And so, if you go to the next slide. So, again, the scores are going to be very similar to everything that you're familiar with in quality events and in general. How does it affect? What risks are we bringing into this project? How did we identify these risks, and what are they going to do? So as you move from the current state into what you want to decide on the future state, then you have to analyze the risks that are going to be associated. So what risks are inherent with software projects?
Blow up another software system, another application.
Okay.
Lose your data.
Okay, lose data. Anything else? Anybody else? Troy?
Back to expectations. Wrong expectations at the beginning of the project, or the change is not clearly defined.
Okay. Again, it's a scope, undefined scope. Scope creep happens all the time. I mean, we deal with projects on a regular basis in our department, and there are some of the projects that it just seems like they never move because we may not have the right people in the room. We may be dealing with an IT group that doesn't have the business group's buy-in, and so there's some buffering that goes on between the IT group and the business buy-in. And so, how do we present that risk to the stakeholders and the shareholders? Again, it goes back to our communication. At what point do we have to communicate? Risk in a project is critical to identify and to not be afraid to put that up on a risk management board and have a risk management team that's comprised of finance, with your IT, with your business, quality, so that you've got buy-in from all the different teams. And so risk management sometimes, from what I've seen, it kind of sometimes gets swept under the carpet on some of the projects, but we've got to really make sure that the risks are out in front so that we can mitigate against those. Craig, you want to take this one? No, I just so I really like defining where we want to see the project go. It's part of Six Sigma. It's part of every project that you're ever going to implement. You're going to look at where you want it to be. That's the ultimate goal of how you're going to get there. Why do you think it's important to redefine the final state of your project once you've identified where you're at?
I think about I see modified because, or insane. There's a couple of projects I'm working on now, they tried to do it before. And part of the attitude of some of the shareholders are, oh, we tried this before and we went through all of this and nothing happened. So we've got to sort of redefine, what the end result is going to be. So now that was version A, we're growing to version B, bigger and better. And I'm trying to really concentrate on this is going to be a different outcome this time. It's a little tough, but I got buy-in from the question group necessarily. But I'm finding this more and more and more and more communication, working through some of the details and things like that.
So you as a project manager, if you go back to your shareholders with the exact same thing that they did before, you're going to get shut down.
Actually, the way I started out, I showed them that. Here's sort of where we failed before. Here's why this didn't fail. Here's what we're going to do instead of.
So you're building on your successes,
building on the success,
learning from your
learn
mistakes.
from our mistakes, and here's the new direction. And I did a lot more about it. Because I asked them, why did you think this didn't work? Why didn't this meet your expectation? What do you expect? I find that asking a lot of, I have a simple template that I, who, what, where, why do you want this? And I get a lot of feedback. And they're receptive to, if I tell them, well, the system can't do this or can't do that, would you be open to an alternative? And I get a lot of feedback. So the more and more you talk to your shareholders and really try to understand, what is it that you want, what is it that you expect, and really helps.
So is that kind of a similar experience that you guys have experienced with trying to resurrect projects that may have gone to the side? Anybody want to share any other practical experiences that they've had?
Well, you asked me earlier to chime in. I don't want
No,
to take the conversation. I want you guys to. But I think one thing I could offer is that an organization or a project gets the results that it's designed to get every time. What I mean by that is that your plan produces what it should be getting. So the trick is to figure out how to plan it. And I think that's exactly what this gentleman is saying. You can't do things the same. You've got to switch it. So I think that's one of the things, getting back on track, is realizing we can't do the same thing again.
I think it is also looking at the business, the business that attract and love for to be something different than what are those differences, and that or just looking at.
Because if the results were poor in the beginning, what do we need to do to correct them? And that's really where, when you define the final state, before you even go down that road, that's where you meet with your stakeholders, shareholders, and say, what's the final outcome that we want, so that we can say, modify this, kill it, go back, start over on your project plan again, and then we'll move forward.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to do the stakeholders.
Oh, because that goes right into communication.
Yep.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about stakeholders, shareholders. Who needs to be involved with a master control type of implementation? I mean, I assume everybody's here because they're either had some struggles or need to get either master control back on track in their organization, or what are the basic underlying needs that brought you here to this class today?
Well, I'm right in the middle of implementing a form, and I don't want this to happen. So it's almost as a preventative measure, when I've had projects, I've had a project that sort of failed, but not really. So, yes, I want to make sure my project succeeds.
Okay. So you spoke up, so we're going to pick on you a little bit. So what stakeholders, what shareholders do you need involved with this?
I need the front line, I need some users,
Okay.
input. I need management.
Okay.
And I need IT.
Okay. Sysadmins?
Yes.
What else do you need? Do you need some of our architects and engineers to be part of that?
Yes.
So, the software team that's at MasterControl, you need, those are shareholders as well. Anybody else?
Well,
Quality?
checks.
Yep. Finance? So perfect. So we have to define who the stakeholders are. We have to define what their level of engagement is going to be. The CFO is going to do what? Rubber stamp a money. Say, yep, it's good to go. Do they need to be updated every single week on where we're at with the project? Probably not. Okay. Who else? There's one other person that, if I put a plug in for my team, there's one other person that we didn't identify, which would be a project manager on MasterControl side that can help facilitate resources back. And so that's one of the ones that we sometimes miss over because we've seen it on our side where you guys are great project managers, but you may not be as familiar with our internal workings, and so it's easier for us to coordinate and to get the resources allocated in a timely fashion. One of the biggest thing is, who is the ultimate decision maker? I ran into this recently. Is it IT or is it the business development? Is it quality? Who's the decision maker? That's the stakeholder or the shareholder in your process.
I don't know if there is an ultimate decision maker.
So who's the project sponsor? It's really going to drive this. That's your champion that can
My
champion.
department director.
Okay. And so they're the ones that go to bat for you when you
Yes.
need more funds,
Yes.
or if you need to change things, or if we need to go back to ground zero, restart, it's your department manager. Is that pretty much everybody's in the same boat? Okay.
So is that the person that calls done? So let's say in your example with the form, who accepts the form ultimately? Yes, this is what we need to do X. Is it your department manager?
My manager.
Probably be a cumulative effort of, because right now we're just starting our user testing. So it'd be an accumulation of everybody's response to the form. Was it a success? And a debate about that. And ultimately it'd probably be, because we have the system director, so it'd probably be a decision among those. And ultimately, yes, I guess it would be my department manager signing off, but it would be in consideration of everybody's opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So are those people, that kind of leads us to the next question. Are those people in the same room, in the same meetings all the time? And what's being lost in translation?
Usually they're in the same
You
meeting.
Okay. Because when there's a lot of times when I have project meetings that I will be dealing with an IT person or a business person, and we may not have everybody in the same room. And there are the back and forth that we lose things in translations because what I say you hear differently, and then what you say to the next member of the team, they interpret different. And so by the time we get 2 or 3 generations away from what was originally discussed, it's a completely different topic sometimes. So
I'm going to interject one more thing. So for a process form, for example, it's really critical for your success that you have the right definition for what the needs are. And really calling done is that 2 things. It does what you asked for it to do, but also ultimately it performs the need. So sometimes it's a little bit of a difference there. You can define something up front, it might not exactly meet the need. That's where you need to get consensus from your team that, okay, to meet the need, we need to do this one more thing. But you need that person that says, we're done. Oh, it would be nice if the font was blue. Well, we don't really need that right now. So for a form success, I think you really need to keep that in mind is, does it do what we need for it to do? Could this field be over here? Yeah, maybe. But, ultimately, does that impact what you're trying to accomplish? And I think if you stay focused on what it's supposed to do and compare it to what you requested for it to do, you will be successful. It's when you start wandering around and everybody has one little input, and it's really easy to get lost in those weeds. Troy?
Yeah, so along that same line, especially in a process project, having a defined list of, say, have to have and nice to haves would be a good place to start, because as we said, these projects tend to scope creep, I think, process model stuff is the biggest problem with these projects, because you want to kind of create this custom thing that's going to work for everybody, do everything. So you want to do kind of a cost-benefit analysis and say, look, it would be nice to have this, but maybe that's going to cost too much or take too much time. Is there a way to work around this to keep the project within scope? So
That's your challenge.
yeah, that's the biggest, having done this for biggest challenge. Definitely.
Yeah, and Rollin made a really good point. Don't forget that we, the project managers and MasterControl, are there to help you with these kinds of things. I'm losing my voice already. So you're going to talk more than you thought you would.
Okay. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and so I kind of want to talk about communication. If you'll just go to the next slide. Right. This is going to be kind of hard to see, so it'll be in the project slides that we get back to them, or they'll be available for download. It is a communication matrix, and in project management school, they teach you to build a communication matrix. This is one that we've kind of developed for a documents and training implementation. So we go through, what needs to be communicated, who it needs to be communicated to, when it needs to be communicated, how often, and by whom. And those are key points to keep your communication lines open with all of your shareholders and stockholders and stakeholders, so that you can actually get the right information out at the right time. Because if you keep it to yourself or you don't transmit it, then it catches people off on surprise. The CFO all of a sudden says, "Oh, I didn't realize we were going to have to, because of our internal decisions, we're going to double the cost, or we're going to save X amount. We can allocate that elsewhere." So again, communications and being able to communicate your needs and the outcomes of every meeting to the right people at the right time is probably one of the most beneficial things, so that we avoid the scope creep, that we can say, look, department director, I don't have people volunteering to test this. I don't have an end user in place to test this. I've got 15 other tasks that I'm doing. Which one is the most important? Help me prioritize this. And if that communication, sometimes we try to take too much on ourselves. We've got to be able to get that communication out. So communication for me is probably the most important and critical part of the project manager's position from our side and as well as your side, to help us ensure that we're on the right track. Next slide.
Managing success.
Is that you?
Well, it can be a combination.
Okay, so some of the points that we wanted to raise as far as managing to success is reform the team. Even if it's not a formal switching out of people or whichever way you want to do it, still address it as a reform. So get them all again in the same room, talk about it, talk it through, say this is where we're at, this is where we need to go, get some input from the team. Sometimes as things start to get harder and harder, the team gets discouraged and they kind of drift away and they stop coming to meetings and stuff. So if you're going to relaunch, you really need to reform your team. That's really critical. Finding ways to motivate. There's some really interesting literature out there right now about the carrot and the stick, where basically a carrot is just another stick. It's really interesting to read right now that what motivates some people won't motivate others, and what motivation to one may look like punishment to the rest of the team. So you have to be really careful about how you do that. The public motivation, never, ever, ever silently reward someone on the side because you've just destroyed your team right there. So there's really good literature. I recommend going out and doing some research on that, on how to motivate again. Keep your goal in mind because that's where you're headed. You might have a new goal. You might have the same goal but a different way to get there. So that's really important to be clear with the team. Creating a sense of urgency but not panic, because panic is bad. Nobody makes good decisions when they're panicked. I don't even. No. So urgency, it's important, it's urgent, we need to focus on it, but not because that does not work. And keep redefining your plan as you meet your milestones. We're kind of moving away from the standard waterfall, we're trying to implement more agile functionality in our project management because as you reach a milestone, sometimes you need to redefine the next one. The way to get to the next one might be a little bit different depending on how that milestone was achieved. So keep that in mind that, the old style project management, you create a project plan in January and you execute it all the way through December. It works a lot better if, in March you revisit and tweak and in June you revisit and tweak. So keep that in mind too, because that's a lot more successful at re-motivating and reworking a project that had failed. That's it. Any questions or some other insights on how you've been able to re-motivate some people or get another project forward? You have wonderful ideas.
So, motivation.
Oh yeah, the carrot and the stick kind of.
It's hard. It's hard to motivate.
It is hard.
I've worked on teams where I had to go and find the resources, network guides, or develop, work within their schedule. I work with everybody. So, having choices can go.
It's a lot easier if you already have a relationship with those people, though, right? So building
Most
good
of the time.
relationships is easier. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts?
If you could take a few seconds and fill out this, keep getting the sign flashback.
Thank you for coming and attending our session today, and the slides are available when?
They'll be on the customer side, not exactly sure.
Okay.
But they'll be along with the recordings and some of these.
And Louise and I will be down in the Genius Bar
The rest
the
of
rest
the
of the
day.
day, so if you've got questions or specific things that you want to ask us, feel free to come track us down or, or even, touch base with us.
One of the most interesting PM speakers I've heard recently is Ken Whitaker, and he's got this little booklet out called I'm Not God, I'm Only a Project Manager. And it's a little booklet. I don't know if it's 30 pages. It's really, really good. He's got a great website out there if you're interested in getting some more ideas. He's a really good person to get some from. Thank you.
Thank you.